I feel like this isn't my thing, but I should explain the gin collector thing. I just happen to collect gin, so I can recommend it. I'm not sure it's because I'm a journalist or just the symptom and cause. I'm not sure which comes first. But gin or journalist, I don't know. Anyway. Right, so anyway, my name is Felix Duckworth. Thank you for my introduction. I currently work as the Deputy Chief, so you promoted me slightly, on the features desk at the Daily Mail. And sub-editors aren't let out of the office very much, so forgive me if I have a little bit of stage fright. We also like a pun, but I'm sure you've heard the one about going to Hull and back, so I'll stop there. So how did I get into production journalism, which is very different from reporting? I'd like to say what it entails, what's it like to work for a national newspaper, and hint of what the future of sub-editing in the digital age will be. So how did I start? Sorry, that's just gone all the way down to the bottom. I did a history degree at Hull University, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. It's always a good time to come back. In uni, I did bits and bobs on the university paper Hull Fire, so it's fairly typical entry in the late 90s into journalism. Work experience on local in the late 90s into journalism. Work experience on local papers, Wakefield Express, Accrington Observer. I'm from Lancashire. It was only after I graduated that I really got into journalism, did a newspaper postgrad at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston. That led to more work experience, and I picked up a brief internship at the Daily Telegraph, which led me to some work on the paper's website, which was called the Electronic Telegraph. That led to freelance shifts, followed by a permanent job, and became chief sub on the website, and then freelancing, and now I'm here at the Daily Mail. That pattern of how I got into journalism and got a job in newspaper, so you go for shifts, you show you can do the work, you can be valuable, you do more shifts, and you finally get a job. That's fairly typical in my experience. I've only ever had one job interview in 17 years in Fleet Street, and I didn't get that job. So I went through freelancing, went to another job, and finally ended up with another staff job. And so while there are some great trainee schemes out there, and this course is one of them, and City University, Preston, all of those, if you find yourself as a jobbing freelancer, a reporter or a sub-editor or a digital online journalist, don't be put off. Persevere, focus on doing the shifts, and the jobs will follow. Back to the Electronic Telegraph, I joined in 1999, and it was only a few years old. It launched in 1994. It was the first national newspaper to go online, and it was pretty small and experimental. It was the days of dial-up internet. Blogging hadn't been invented. There were no embedded YouTube videos of cats doing funny things, and certainly no way of sharing stories on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or WhatsApp. But there was a digital readership, and that's obviously grown massively over the last 2 decades. The Telegraph, in the early days, outperformed the Guardian's website, which was pretty much the only other rival all the time. And as it developed, we started doing the things that Alison has gone on and talked about and developed much more. So we started having breaking news service, rewriting wire copy and using some Telegraph writers to fill the gaps. We started using text alerts and SMS for major breaking stories, and we tried to make the website as interactive as possible, which is obviously was more difficult then because we didn't have much technology, we didn't have much budget. And it was always a battle. Culturally, it was a battle between print and online. And as an early online journalist, we struggled to get print people to come over to us. Mainly because I think journalists want to write for publications where they will get the most readers. And in the early 2000s, that still meant newspapers rather than websites. That shift happened majorly from about 2005 onwards, I'd say, and accelerated to where we are today. Working at Electronic Telegraph did get me into production journalism. Seems to suit me. I did some reporting, but I was never massively cut out for it. One of the things of production journalism, if you want to go into it, remember it can be unsociable hours. Deadlines tend to finish at night. rolling news on Mail Online works through the night. If you want a really lively party social life, probably don't go into production journalism. During my time at the Telegraph, I started working on the Daily Telegraph as well and the Sunday Telegraph, and that's where I kind of went into subbing properly on newspapers. So what does a newspaper sub-editor do? And why is that different to subbing on a website? The quick answer is a newspaper sub is that we make copy stories fit in layouts and make the newspaper tick. On a website, as you know, you don't have limitations of space, either in headlines or copy, and because of that, subbing on a newspaper is more exacting. You've got to make every word count. There's a bit more to it than that, though. Sub-editors, we write captions, headlines, check facts, check spellings, rewrite copy to make it better. Improve intros, make sure the story is in house style, has the right tone. Pester reporters and writers to question whether they've got their story right. Check spellings again. Spot legal issues and raise them with lawyers and senior editors. Think about taste and whether stories and certain details should be in a family newspaper. And research and use the best story pictures. We also check whether stories are new. I can't tell you the number of times as a sub, but I've had a story given to me by a reporter or a news desk, and it's an old story. It can't go in the paper. For about 2 years at the Mail, I was the sub on the Diary, which is the society page. And that was one of my main jobs, was to look at the rivals, look at the Diary and the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Independent, and make sure if they had the story first, then we couldn't run it. So we'd have to redesign the page, and sometimes that happened really, really late on. Basic checks that the reporters should have done at 10:30 in the morning haven't been done. I pick them up at 15 minutes to deadline. We've got to redraw the page. Well, that's the problem, yeah. Yeah. And you could throttle them. Yeah.
So my husband's also a reporter, so I say, right, I'm going to try to get this word past the sub. I remember once we had a word invasive, and my husband said that would never get past the sub. He was a hack on the Liverpool Post, so he knew. He said, it's too difficult to work. And I'd write it, and then we'd get the paper in the morning, and it said, yes!
Yeah.
It was good. You're brilliant, subs are amazing, but yeah, you are very, very precise.
We try to be. Sometimes time is such that you miss things, and everybody's human and all that. So when I was at Preston, my tutor always tried to get the word bosky into every story he wrote. He was a gruff crime reporter on the Observer, Manchester Observer. Bosky, it means wooded. But there we go. Don't know why he tried it, but that was his word. So people have favourite words, which is quite fun. But anyway. Anyway, so there's also the editor's code, the brave new world of IPSO, after the PCC. And as subs, we've got to check, we must check that a story doesn't contravene the rules in terms of privacy, accuracy, identification of children in particular, harassment, infringements, and another whole host of concerns that you'll be aware of. And if there's a mistake, and this is probably the worst job of being a sub-editor, if it's a comma out of place, it's your fault, and you get the blame. And I have been blamed by Paul Dacre several times, which is an experience. I won't say it just things getting wrong, production things going wrong, and not being up to his standards. He's an exacting man. The basics of how the Daily Mail is produced. In terms of features, we've got 2 main commissioning desks, plus sections for health, finance, showbiz and so on. All these journalists are involved in the early conferences of the day. And as the news agenda takes shape and the senior executive decide what mix of stories they want in the next day's paper and what stories they want the various desks to focus on. Obviously there's projects which are commissioned and aimed at particular days, driven either by the general timetable of news or political diary, or because the editor wants a particular story followed up. Mail's always had a great history of campaigning, from exposing the killers of Stephen Lawrence to more recently campaigning for a change in the law for plastic bags in supermarkets and raising awareness of the dangers of sepsis is our current campaign. And there's always an issue that the editor really wants to push forward. By about the time of the main news conference, which is about 5 p.m. in the afternoon, it's a good idea of what's going to go in the next day's paper and what type of features will provide a balanced package. We don't want to bore readers. This is part of the tell me, help me, entertain me. So if it's a heavy political day, we're more likely to have a feature spread with snappy captions about Donald Trump's hair. And more often than not, news changes during the day, and the mix of the paper will change with it, and the features that we've been working on for a few hours will drop out. We'll be getting new stories, new pages, new layouts, and we've got to turn around everything in double quick time. Whatever happens, the final deadline is still the same. That's immutable, and in our case, that's 10 p.m., and we've got to hit it. If we miss it, we lose money, we lose readership, and we get shouted at. From that, you get a hint that sub-editors and all journalists have to be pretty flexible. And the Mail working on features doesn't mean we're locked away in a side office, and we're integral to the newspaper, and when I'm chief subbing, I'll oversee everything from the crosswords and Sudokus on the puzzles pages, to the TV review, that day's features section, which is health on a Tuesday or personal finance on a Wednesday, then a look at columnist, Richard Littlejohn, Peter Oborne, and then finally the features at the front of the book, which can be spreads, which can be the leader column, which can be the editorials, everything. Within that process, I'll draw up pages using Adobe InDesign, research and choose pictures, sometimes edit them in Photoshop, write headlines, write captions, improve other sub-editors, layouts, headlines and captions, check that stories don't clash with adverts. They sometimes do, and it can be embarrassing. Clear pages with senior editors and double check that every single one of my sub-editors has checked every name, every age, every address, and every fact that's about to be printed. Subbing is really, at its heart, the building blocks of journalism. It is the who, what, where, why, when, how. Do the basics. You kind of go in, you kind of do the basics every day. You build those stories up. And reporters work on deadlines. They work very quickly. Sometimes they get things they miss things. Also, stories develop, so you've got to rewrite stories as they come in, and things change. More information is gained during the day. Anyway, and mistakes happen. But the job of a sub is to spot those mistakes and stop them going into the paper. And sadly, unlike on a website, once a paper's in a newspaper, it's in a newspaper and it's there forever. And again, you get shouted at. You also get more complaints if there's a crossword clue that's wrong than pretty much for anything else. Readers are loyal, and if their favourite part of a newspaper or a website is errors strewn across it, they'll happily ring you up and complain. So the job of a sub is pretty varied, and that's one of the best things about it. It's fun, interesting and rewarding to work on a major campaign about sepsis one day, next day do the book reviews on Russian Tsars. Tomorrow is budget day, and I'm chief subbing the features tomorrow, and I'll be busy probably not doing finance pages, but my job will be to get and clear the 40 or so features pages I'll have, and then I'll be responsible for and get those away as quickly and in time and as soon as possible during the day, so the news teams have more space to report on whatever George Osborne has in store. As a chief sub-editor or a night editor on a national newspaper or a regional newspaper, you'll soon learn that production flow is vital in terms of hitting deadlines. It's not sexy, but it's what makes newspapers tick and what gets them into the shops. So, what's it like to work for the horrible, beastly Daily Mail? The answer is not that bad. Do I have to believe every word that Richard Littlejohn says? No, I don't. But I do strongly believe in free speech and accept that other people have views that are different from mine and that they want to read and voice them in the Daily Mail and other newspapers. The Mail is a conservative, right-leaning, middle-class newspaper, And as last May's general election results shows, there are quite a few of those type of people in Britain. If you only read Twitter, then the Mail probably seems abhorrent. And I don't think anyone should be surprised that the Mail and the Sun, but I don't think anybody should be surprised that the Mail and the Sun are still the biggest selling newspapers in the UK when we have a Tory government. The Mail also excels in being provocative. When appropriate, it's a paper that refuses to take prisoners, as even David Cameron and his allegedly porcine friend can attest. Yes, the Mail takes immigration seriously, but arguably only because politicians like Tony Blair never did. And yes, the Mail's outlook is critical, but only because there are plenty of politicians, bureaucrats and city fat cats who are keen to feather their own nests at the expense of ordinary people, and from our point of view, Daily Mail readers. A couple of examples. Last year in Money Mail section, we took up the case of a terminally ill reader who'd had his life insurance claim rejected because of some small print. We fought his corner and the company backed down and gave him £200,000 plus payout so he could be sure that his family would be provided for after his death. That's good campaigning journalism. The Mail's investigations unit has also recently exposed us how much some public sector bosses take in pay and payoffs. A scandal if ever there was one, when hospital budgets are cut to the quick. So, no, I don't think the Daily Mail is the cause of every ill in society, in the same way that I don't believe that Facebook is to blame for everything that's wrong with the internet. In fact, I believe the opposite, and it's no bad thing to have a noisy, provocative and unrelenting newspaper holding leaders, public services and companies to account. But back to subbing and how it's changing. Sadly, I feel that the internet is slightly killing the art of the headline. That's my favourite, which is a Sun one, supercalifragilistic Celtic were atrocious. I'm not sure either of those would get past the search engine optimization and go further up Google's hit list. More positively, subs on both newspapers and websites do much more than they used to. And on local papers in particular, the lines are being blurred even further, with reporters now producing their own pages for the titled paper and website. More skills are being more diverse, and that makes the job more interesting, I think. So now the role as a sub-editor is broadening out from editing copy to including writing, researching stories, getting quotes, editing videos, editing pictures, doing the analytics. All these are strong skills to have, and they'll be the ones that you're learning now and you'll take into the workplace. Equally, I'd say one of the joys of journalism is that it can lead to other careers and jobs. You don't have to stay sitting in front of a screen writing up boring press releases. Because reporting and working as a commissioning or production journalist can give you a huge breadth of experience, and I'd say more so now than 15, 20 years ago when I first started. Some of my friends from journalism, of course, have made it as reporters on the big regional papers, nationals. Some went into radio, television. Some went to work for the BBC. Others from there to organisations like UEFA. Others worked for women's magazines. Others jumped into PR, doing press relations for police in universities. Others went into policy units. One of my friends started as a trainee for the Press Association, specialising in medical stories, became medical correspondent on the Scotsman. She now works in the policy unit at the Royal College of Nursing. In terms of subbing, it's a good career path to get into. It leads on to other things. My peers and former trainees from the Mail now working as chief subs at the Times, night editors at the Sun, BuzzFeed, Yahoo. Sports editor at the Times is a former Daily Mail trainee sub-editor. Helen Lewis, deputy editor of the New Statesman, she's a former trainee sub. Within the Mail, lots of scope for moving around. Former subs are now working as assistant sports editors, deputy editors of the health section, that sort of thing. So even if it doesn't feel like it when you're doing your first job reporting or from a school fete or classic cliche, or putting in calls to the local police to see if anything's happening, all those things matter, give you a nose for what makes a story, even if, like me, you don't actually do the news gathering yourself, but work within a large machine that produces a newspaper or news product. National newspapers, indeed any newspaper, work best when everybody at every level in the machine applies a critical mind to what they're reading, reporting, and subbing. Journalism means scrutiny. I can't stress that enough, scrutiny. And applying that to everything, whether you're reporting on a speech by David Cameron, going to a local council meeting, or checking a crossword. A final thought, as Rosie said earlier, journalism is driven by deadlines and can be relentless and bruising. And I'd say that because of that, one piece of advice I give you is to be resilient. As Stuart Pearce once said, you need bounce-back ability. And have confidence in your own ability. Take the knocks, and then get it for more. And finally, the verb to practice is spelt with an S. So that's me, but any questions? I think newspapers have always, and media generally, have always been part of the opposition, the natural opposition of the way in which politics works, particularly in the UK. To an extent, that can sometimes flip, and it can be the newspapers setting the agenda. But again, I don't think that's no bad thing. When certainly in the case, arguably at the moment when you have a fairly weak opposition and a government that arguably sees itself as a carte blanche to do what it wants. Yeah.
Do you know when, like you say, obviously the news has got on the agenda, have you ever felt at some point they've told you what to write and you don't want to write it and go completely against it?
I suppose I have the luxury as a sub that I don't actually write it. Well, no, but I mean, I see your point. I think anybody who works for a big organisation, you have to accept that that there is a hierarchy in that organisation, and there's conversations at editorial levels that I'm not party to, and they're deciding where they want to go for their readership. And that might be based on gut instincts, that might be based on their politics, that might be based on the proprietor's politics, it might be based on analytics of what stories our readers like to read. And being slightly lower down the food chain means, to an extent, I just have to suck it up and do my job professionally and do the production process, even if I don't necessarily agree with what's happening with that as a news angle. But I can always appreciate it, why it is going to be a news angle. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, sorry.
You speak about, obviously, holding the governments accountable. Do you believe we have a genuinely free press?
Yeah. I think it's difficult. The last 10 years has been quite difficult because, but I think we're coming out of that. I think the Met investigations after phone hacking brought that massively into question, whether we actually do have a free press. I think because most of the cases collapsed, with the odd exception, then that witch hunt has kind of come to an end. Witch hunt is probably a very strong. Witch hunt is a strong word, but I think a lot of people. I know colleagues who. One of my colleagues, who will remain nameless, is former Sun journalist, and he and his wife had a list of things that they expected the Met to find, including their lost remote control, when they came knocking at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I think there's a very strong argument that what happened in Met after phone hacking was quite a strong reaction. And was that proportionate to what the actual crimes committed, which were criminal things, but yes, people went to jail for them. I don't. Yeah, Rose.
I think the Mail is an amazing product. I read it every day. It is very often on it before anyone else is, and it is a model of its type. It is a fantastic product. There is, speaking as someone who worked for the BBC for a long time, still occasionally works for the BBC, why is it that the Daily Mail so convinced that the BBC is full of communists? I mean, it is.
I don't know.
It is. Why is the Daily Mail so against the BBC all the time? I mean, it is not the. It's not a blame.
It's a default. I'd agree. It's a fairly default setting. But equally, we have to sort of play the game, and we on the entertainment side of liking TV shows and the great things about the BBC. I think the Mail generally thinks that there's careful. I want a job to go back to.
You're safe here.
It's been broken. I think the Mail would say that I would say that the Mail would say that the principles of the BBC are very noble and upheld. It's the management wastage that it particularly focuses on, and large sums of money for executives at the Daily Mail at the Daily Mail.
Yes, go on.
Sorry to talk about that. At the BBC, are they justifiable in a?
It says it's politically biased. I mean, it does actually have a case for the BBC. Yeah, it warrants the case for the BBC being very left-wing.
Mm. Having worked at the BBC, I've done little bits of the BBC as well. I don't know whether would you say it's generally central, left, right, or do you think it's a neutral?
The BBC is always in favour of the status quo by any
Mm.
measurable, anything you can measure.
Yeah, I mean, there was a survey found that the most read paper BBC is The Guardian. I'm not surprised about that.
Yeah.
I think it's conservative, small c. I think it in itself it is liberal, but I don't think it's. I do not think it's radical, and I don't think it's outrageously left-wing. I really don't. And I've worked in the news for 10 years.
Mm. I think it's probably a question of perceptions, and newspapers like the Mail like something to fight as well.
Yeah, it's a stat.
Yeah. I've been rung up by the press office for a headline that I wrote last year, by the BBC press office, to complain about it. But that was a point of view written by the reviewer about a TV programme, and it was a justified headline on the basis of what happened.
Might be interesting to know that the 6 o'clock news that BBC takes great, the running order takes great account of what's on the front page of the Daily Mail. I mean, newspapers are something which is dying off, or newspapers are incredibly important. I mean, just look at the amount of paper reviews on Sky and BBC and ITV. Television outlets take print newspapers.
Serious, yeah. And the serious readership still, and just for all websites, several million people read all those newspapers a day, and that's the audience. That's the same audience. Many of our readers consume the BBC avidly.
Yeah.
They don't exclusively read the Daily Mail. They get annoyed by the BBC because they love the BBC so much. I'd say our readers, and our readers write in and say, why can't George? Why? I mean, there's many people. You talked about John Humphreys earlier, and he is brilliant. But some people, he does irritate other people, because you have that sometimes aggressive, and sometimes it's the nature of the beast of the Today programme, and that can wind up some listeners, and they're also our readers. So they write to us and say, why won't the BBC do something about John Humphreys?
It's exactly to a politician is that of a dog to a lamppost.
Yeah, totally. JD.
Just coming back to the word you said, perception, and when you were saying about the BBC, perhaps so the Daily Mail is kind of playing into that perception and perpetuating it to some extent, but isn't it the responsibility of the journalist as part of the
But I don't think we're not making things up though.
No, but it's by sort of
But we can
perception or a stereotype that's manipulated or magnified. It's playing with the truth. It's not completely going out of that, but it's playing with the
But if you're campaigning on a journalist and you're hammering at one thing to get attention on that, then that's your right to do that. And if that's about mismanagement in the BBC executive corridors, then so be it. You're allowed to print a story every day about that. Yeah.
it's not sort of in terms of
I don't think that's misrepresenting. If it's happening, then it's not misrepresenting.
How would you reconcile, it's like you said, a lot of these media corporations have a political leaning left or right. How would you reconcile it if you're trying to be an unbiased journalist, like completely sort of dead centre, with working for a media corporation that has a political leaning? I mean, like, if you want to write balanced, like, 'cause that's what we're being taught.
Yeah.
But how balanced, like, 'cause that's what we're being taught.
Yeah.
But I can't sort of reconcile it in my head. How do you do that?
To an extent, production side can be quite agnostic. So as I say, you don't have to believe everything you're doing. You're doing a production job, and you're trying to do that professionally.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think if you feel massively strongly about it, you probably don't work for the Daily Mail, or you don't work for the.
I'm not saying the Daily Mail.
Yeah, or you don't work for the Guardian or whatever. If you know, so that's something you have to reconcile with yourself, I think. So is that?
No, it's just like you said. I don't think there's any media organisation that is sort of dead centre. They all sort of lean slightly to the left or slightly to the right. But we're being told that essentially, to be a journalist, you have to be unbiased. You have to balance, and it's really hard to look at.
Sure, but you're always working within an editorial environment, and there is that hierarchy, as Rosie was saying earlier. If the editor tells you to ask the question about the Viagra, so if the editor wants to produce a newspaper that is left or right, then that's how it's going to go, and you have to sort of follow that. That's the brief, as it were. If you're there on your first day as a reporter, and the brief is to write for, and you joined a left-leaning newspaper, the brief is to ask those particular questions for your readers who are left-leaning, and they want to hear it from Jeremy Corbyn's perspective or whatever.
But, so you can still do that with balance?
Yeah, I think you can, yeah. You can still get that within the context.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Felix Duckworth.